Brandon is the CEO and owner of Sunbelt of Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and the Florida Panhandle, the premier business brokerage firm servicing Louisiana and Florida. With over a decade of professional experience, his roots in the industry run deep. Having grown up in the business his father founded, Brandon offers a unique, lifelong perspective of buying and selling businesses. Brandon, welcome to the show.
George, how we doing, buddy? All is well,
Great.
you?
Excited to have you on. And we've talked about this like all the different all times of like
Yes.
how to buy a business. And I don't really know if there's a person out there that's better at it than you. So kind of like laying the groundwork here. What is it that you do and your firm does?
Well, we've been in operation for over 25 years with 7 offices across Louisiana and, as you mentioned, the Florida Panhandle. We specialize in, real simply, putting buyers and sellers of businesses together. That was my dad's favorite saying when he started 25 years ago. Got training from Ed Pendarvis, the legend at Sunbelt, and here we are today. I'll be 14 years in May doing this, and I feel like an old man saying that. I feel like I have some gray hair coming on for a 35-year-old, having to feel like I've been doing this for almost 14 years, which is considered a old man's, I hate to say that, profession. There's not many guys under the 40, yet alone under 30 when they started. I was 21. We appreciate the compliment. We've done this a long time, done over 850 deals. We've seen a little bit of everything. And even then, still sometimes we get surprised. But we'd love to share our insights and glad to be on the podcast with you.
The big question I keep hearing from people out there who aren't familiar with the industry. What's the difference between a business broker and a real estate agent?
You're right. And I think you hear the word broker and get confused. They think like stockbroker. They don't understand the average broker. I feel like with other services, like whether it's real estate or like, investments, they have a product, they sell you, they move on to the next. Business brokerage is a little bit different. I was actually golfing Sunday with a vice president of another major real estate firm here in town that does mostly commercial. It's like, so what's the real difference between us? I said, it's simple. You'll get a property, you value it, you throw a sign in the front yard, doing the ad in the air, and you see if you find buyers for it. You can lease it, you can sell it. I said, a business is much more complicated, and the sale of it is much more complicated. One, you have to have an accounting background, to some degree, financial background, to understand how to value this company. Then you take the intangibles, the company structure, the ownership, the way the workflow chart goes, and you start looking at competition, strategic buyers in the area. There's a lot more to it to value this company and then take it to market confidentially and sell it confidentially. I don't get to put a sign in the front yard saying, hey, buy this 4,000 square foot warehouse. We have a whole different process, and it takes a lot longer. And finally, it's a financing background that's different too, as far as getting loans to buy businesses. That is the ultimate trump card that most realtors have zero experience in. And if you don't understand SBA, the SOP, standard operating procedures, and all the things that go into getting financing for a business, you're going to stub your toe 99 out of 100 times. And that's the biggest difference that we bring to the table, is knowing how to value the company, and then if necessary, get the financing set up, because most deals will need some form of financing. And that's probably the most important part, honestly, besides just valuing the company.
Your clients are totally different. How you bring these businesses to market is totally different than real estate. The people buying the businesses, totally different. How you interact with them, how you negotiate the price. And then
That's right.
the actual financial structures that you use to acquire these businesses isn't a real estate type
No,
loan.
it's not like going to buy a house or buy a commercial property where it's 100% collateralized asset the bank wants to loan on. There's a lot of blue sky in these deals, and a lot of businesses, especially with the multiples getting larger these days and the EBITDA numbers going up and up and up, the blue sky amount loaned on increases. And for those who not listening, that's anything over the hard asset value, like the building, the tables, the chairs, FF&E. So if you're talking, some banks even have a 1 million to 1.5 million blue sky cap in SBA. There's some that will have unlimited. But a commercial lender, an average conventional lender, if you go down the street to your local bank and say, I want to buy a business and there's 50% blue sky, unless you got that much in collateral just to pledge a loan, good luck. It's not going to happen. And that's where realtors tend to fail. Well, just go down to the bank and get a loan. It's not that simple. Even if you get an agreement in price, which is still the hard part to do and value the company, going to get the loans even harder sometimes, it feels like.
And then going into what type of clients you typically work with, like who are these business owners that you're working with and what type of businesses are they?
Absolutely. Typically, these are owners with value from under $50 million and under is where we typically tend to work. We do a lot in the lower middle market, 5 to about 20 million. We do some from 20 to 50, but majority of our work is that 5 to 20 million, and then that 5 million to probably about 300,000. We dominate Louisiana. We've been doing it for 25 years. We've had market share for majority of it for about as long as I can remember. Since I was a kid watching my dad run the business, and now having been here almost 14 years, it is a very, very crowded market, yet we still tend to have majority share from having been around so long and having a reputation and a brand that tends to transcend what we do. People know to call Sunbelt because we've been around so long.
The premise of today's show is to help buyers out there learn how to buy a business. And one of the things that I always talk to buyers about is before you even consider buying a business, it's important to understand the market. What do you get yourself into, quite frankly?
Absolutely.
So can you kind of shed some light on what the market's like right now of buying and selling businesses?
Absolutely. I will tell you this. It is the probably biggest swing we've seen in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. I know if everyone's been listening or thinking about buying a company, they've heard the silver tsunami coming. Let's just get that phrase out of the way now early in the podcast. A lot of owners are going to market. It's age, it's the baby boomer generation, retirement. That wave is coming. Now we covered that, let's cross that out. The biggest change in the market is not only are the baby boomers in the market, but it's the youngest buyer generation I've ever seen coming into the market. So clientele who often came to us to sell were mid-50s the up and up. Sometimes in the 80s, really, but mostly 50s to 70. Buyers were 35 to 50. A lot of them were white-collar people that had lost their job in a white-collar situation, were looking to buy a business, or had been in a blue-collar trade that had been learning the skill set, mastered their craft, and now wanted to buy a business rather than starting from scratch if they didn't want to go that route. Now you're seeing just an godly amount of young buyers, some even as young as 21, 22, 23, decision about buying a company doing $500 to $1 million in EBITDA and haven't even had a job out of college yet, really, in any kind of managerial experience. So all of that is dramatically changing the landscape. And the buyers have now, with the advent of the internet and so much great marketing out there, people realize there's opportunities to own these businesses and change your life and make the biggest financial jump you can make in your financial security. The issue is just this buyer group doesn't have all the capital needed right now to do that. So if you are a buyer out there listening, I'm going to give you some good tips today about how to properly reach into this group and how to approach it appropriately, because there's going to be a lot more of you than you realize out there competing. And the ones that know how to stand out, George, are going to have a lot better opportunity to get access to the right listings that they can actually execute on.
What I'm hearing right now from you is it's more competitive now to buy a business than
It is.
it's ever been. And there's a new demographic of buyers that are flooding the market, quite frankly. I guess, what should buyers be doing to prepare themselves for this?
First thing is actually know what your capital amount you have to commit to and what you can realistically afford. And that starts with doing a little bit of education on your end of knowing, how is business financing going to help me? If I'm going to have to finance this deal and go get a loan, how much do I need for a down payment? What is the structure requirements for this loan? Whether deal structure, how much equity down payment I need? And then finally, does my skill set translate to this deal? Because I hear all the time, I'll go get SBL and buy this business. I'm like, okay, well, one, you don't have any background in this industry. And some lenders for certain industries will not loan regardless if you don't have the background requirements on it. Like a restaurant, for example, is a great example. People, I want to buy a restaurant. Do you have restaurant experience? No. Well, most of my lenders, if not all of them, you need 5 to 6 years, full management. Not like, you kind of help run the waiters, you kind of ran the back. You need full restaurant management. You're going to need at least 10% down minimum. And quite frankly, if you check those 2 boxes, you got to know how to approach the right listings and how to, one, value them, interact, and get access to them. And I think today, too many buyers have these very broad parameters. This is exactly what I'm going to do to get this deal. I want anything in $1 million EBITDA. No, you don't. Because if I gave you $1 million EBITDA restaurant, you don't want it. You want trade, you want manufacturing. I know the buzzwords, I know the popular industries. You really need to know what you're looking to do, where your skill set translates, and the capital needed. And if you can't get financing, where to get that capital from and have it be proven committed capital. Anybody can say they have an investor. You know how many times I've seen I have my investors show up to with a checkbook to a deal in my 14 years? Maybe once or twice. And we've done over 850 deals in the tenure of the company. That's what, maybe 2 or 3 deals out of 850? That's pretty low batting average.
What I'm taking away again is, like, as a buyer, you got to have some sort of experience that you're trying to buy this business in.
Do yourself a favor and get experience first. Because if you're going to take on a $2 to $5 million note, don't bankrupt yourself with no experience. Just be logical about that. It's okay if you don't have it right now. Build that track record so when it's time to execute, you can. If you don't have experience, those same buyers then want to handicap the owner for sticking around forever to run the company for them. And the point of these owners is not to do that. It's to sell and eventually move on. And if you don't have the capacity, one, they're not going to want to deal with you. And two, you're not going to get a deal done.
And I think that brings up to like a really good segue here of like having a budget, right? So before you even start clicking all through the different marketplaces out there, understand how much money you want to spend and what's your risk tolerance? Are you willing to put, a personal guarantee on the line, put your house up as collateral? Like, these are common things that you're going to have to get comfortable with. So I guess, like, when you're talking with buyers, are you helping them build a budget, or should they just do this on themselves?
If you're going to do it the right way, you should start first and be sure what your real liquid capital is. Anybody that inquires to our firm has to fill out a non-disclosure, obviously, before they get information, but they also fill out a short financial form. Now, we're not asking bank account numbers, but we're asking for a broad sense of how much liquid cash do you have? What do you have in your retirement? What do you have in other assets? Because we know right now, every lender is going to look at that same financial form and basically categorize where you're going to fall. So if you don't do your budget, you don't know how to, for example, you're not going to go buy a home not knowing how much money you have to put for a down payment. Why would you do the same thing to buy a business? Not to bring up the realtors again, but it's an easy comparison for the average person. And secondly, if you're going to do that by building your budget, you can then, if you want to get pre-qualified with the SBA, you can go ahead and get that done. And we can go into that more later on, but there's a lot of ways of doing that budget and setting that foundation. A broker then knows, hey, this person has at least done some homework and understands what it's going to take to get into a deal. Now, do we do some education? Yes, we do help people understand that you might be able to get more SBA financing than you realized. Or, hey, did you know this deal structure is available if you were considering this? So there is some, I guess, consulting, for a lack of better words, on some of these financial forms and explain to people how deal structure works. But the hardest part we face is if you don't have a budget to start, it's very hard for us to sit there and say, where do we go from here? Because if you can't say, well, I might have 30, 40 grand, but I don't know if I have 100, 30 to 40 to 100 is a massive swing in your ability for 10% down. That goes from a $300,000 business to $1 million business in hypotheticals. So that's a massive swing in cash flow, lifestyle, and investment, and also personal guarantee, as you said. That's a big difference in your risk tolerance. And your budget should help dictate your risk tolerance too.
So a good rule of thumb we always hear is capital you're willing to part with.
Yes.
And that should be a minimum of 10% of the purchase price.
Yes.
So
and also, let me say this too. If you have a spouse, a girlfriend, whoever is living with you, make sure that they're willing to commit with that capital too. Because if you start a deal and then find out the wife or whoever is going to cut you off on that capital, it's going to kill your deal. Make sure it's a full group decision if multiple people are involved.
But the general rule of thumb is ideally a minimum of 10% you'll have invested.
Yes.
Investable. Okay.
If
Gotcha.
it's SBA financeable. Some deals are not. So keep that in mind too, George. If we're going the SBA route, if not, you're probably going to need a heck of a lot more.
The other thing that I think a lot of buyers gloss over is like doing a little bit of self-reflection on like why they want to be a business owner and why they'll be a good business owner. Because I think as they get later on into the process, they're going to have to answer those questions, whether those questions are coming from you or they're talking to the business owner of why do you want to run this business?
You're exactly right. You're auditioning. Whether buyers realize it or not, you are auditioning to this owner to buy this company. This owner doesn't owe you anything. In many cases, they're sharing their legacy, family members, employees who they consider family, and they work for them in often cases 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. Do they want some young pup who shows up who's never had a real discussion with himself what he can do? Thinks he can lead people who have been doing this job for 30 years, especially if you don't have industry experience? How do you present yourself? I know a lot of owners that have turned down opportunities because I know that guy can't run this company, or he's not mature enough, or I don't like this fit. I don't want to see my legacy destroyed. So if you haven't really done some internal thought process on what your skill set and what you can bring to the table, you're going to stub your toe a little bit. And don't be naive that every business is underperforming, under-optimized, and isn't doing things that you can bring a nuance of a different generation or different wave to. Sometimes businesses are the way they are because there are caps and limits to how much time, capital, and energy should be put into doing different things. If you've never run a company, you don't know, and George, you're a founder, how much work falls on your plate that isn't just the day-to-day grind. There are always other things that find a way onto your desk that are your responsibility, whether it was your role or not, or even knew that role even existed sometimes. So I think that's a big misconception. And if you haven't been in business and you haven't been in a management position, I would highly encourage you to get some of that experience first, or get a mentor. Start really knowing what skill sets you have translate, and how, if you do want to take on this position, how you're going to handle it. Because there's very few companies out there that have a fully absentee owner and a perfect manager in place that are just going to be ready for you to come in with no experience and tell them what to do.
See,
No, that's harsh, but it's true.
This is classic because you see a lot of content out there that's catered towards business buyers. Buy a laundromat, never work in there, make $100,000.
Totally absentee.
Yeah. So I guess having sold 850 businesses before in the past, I'm sure there's some business out there that are absentee, but what's your thoughts on these buzzwords on social media of absentee ownership?
It drives me up a wall. I was talking with one of my associates, Gary, who's been with me for almost a decade. We were talking on the last 5 years, that infection has creeped in the mind of every single buyer that's coming through the doors. Every day we get emails and inquiries like, can this business be located to another town and run from my town, remotely? No, this business can't. It's a supplier of detailing parts, and the owner is there every day. Like, every business cannot be run absentee, or life of me, I'm going to say this politely. If there's a business out there that is an fully absentee owner with a manager in place, priced appropriately, why would I not buy it first? I would get first shot at it. Why would I bring it to market if it's that good a deal? Let's be realistic here. The unicorn is not real, okay? There are some very good, horse races racing horses out there that are set up to be transferable and have good management in place that minimize owner interaction on a day-to-day basis. But let's be honest, every owner still has to do quarterly review, look at the returns, find out what's going on. And if your goal is to buy a company, spend $1 million and never be there, that's a really bad decision in my opinion. Let's just be realistic here, especially if you've never ran a company. Now, if Jeff Bezos wants to spend $1 million and never show up, that's different, okay? Like, hey, but for the average person who's personally guaranteeing multi 6 figures to 7 figures, that's not realistic. And everybody wants to be the partially absentee, look, if there are that many businesses like that, that'd be great. But if they aren't, they don't come to market very often. So you have to know what you're buying. And let's take this dynamic here, George. SDE versus EBITDA, seller's discretionary earnings versus EBITDA. I asked what defines both, how you value a business. SDE is a owner-operated full-time business, whereas EBITDA is a company. You have a company of management in place. How you factor your metric into valuing them and how you go about approaching the right company to be involved in matters too. Because if you're buying a business under about $5 million, you're buying a job. You're not going to get to keep your $200,000 salary job, and the SBA says, yeah, you can go buy a $3 million company and be absentee. They're giving you the loan to run that company and be there, not have a second side chick that brings you a check every month that doesn't require any work. Like, I'm sorry, the amount of buzzwords, as you said, out there from different influencers and groups has really, I think, warped buyer perception, and they just believe these are all out there. Let me be honest, every laundromat we've ever sold here, and we probably sold about 30 or 40, if I look at a total look at my list, the owner was still involved in some capacity. And note the owner, most of the time they did, they went to the store and collected the money in the machines to make sure it wasn't stealing from them. Very few had someone they could trust emphatically to go do that for them. Very few. Now, in the digital age, it's getting easier with credit cards and other manners. But let's be honest, these cash-based businesses no one shows up to, no. And if you're a good owner, you're going by and checking on your product and making sure it's in great shape and not going south. Because very often I hear people, I bought this laundromat, I wasn't going to worry about it. Well, it's not making money. Well, how many machines are broken? Well, I think 4, but I haven't gone by in a few weeks. I guarantee you that place is a disaster. There's more than 4 machines broken and no one's called into service. So if you got 30 machines and 4 are down and more are down, you can't generate the same income as someone else, for an easy example.
What other misconceptions are you hearing from buyers out there? Like, another one that comes top of mind is you can buy a business with no money down.
Okay, so that's kind of a trick question because technically you can do that with SBA. If the owner wanted to, back before the SOP change, do a full seller equity injection into the 10% down payment, that wasn't a big deal. But the SBA also changed that rule, and now any seller equity injection into that 10% requirement for SBA loans, that 10% of the total value, the owner's now on a full standby for 10 years of that note and can't receive payments or interest. So what owner wants to wait 10 years to get paid on a deal, especially when they're 60s and 70s, right? That's not logical. Could it be done? Yes. Have I seen it done? Once or twice. And don't come here with earnouts. Earnouts on a full percentage of that are ridiculous and a waste of everyone's time. No owner is going to give you their business on an earnout when there's more in value of the asset they could liquidate and sell themselves. That doesn't make sense. If I've got $500,000 in assets, my business is worth $1 million, why would I let you put no money down and pay me out the proceeds when I could sell the assets for $500,000 today and have no issues? It just doesn't make pragmatic sense. And also encourages a lot of buyers who've never done a budget to come to the market and make an absolute fool of themselves. And I say that politely because, quite frankly, if that's your pitch, you're never going to get very far. And if you do find the unicorn that does it for you, congratulations.
The big thing here too, or key thing here to point out, is a lot of times when there's no money down or some unique structure like this, these generally aren't the most cream of the crop deals out there.
That's fair. And sometimes you do have to seller finance because you can't get a commercial loan or an SBA loan. That's fine. And that happens in a lot of industries, especially ones with cash components where you're not going to have clean financials or reported cash. Laundromats, self-service car washes. We could go down the list of those types of businesses. But typically the owners can somewhat, I'll say, prove it with some kind of ledger or, hey, come into the machines with me one night, once a week for 3 weeks and find out what's really going on because I can't fudge it, myself. We've sold some this year. A laundromat had bad financials, had to be a cash deal for a little bit of seller finance. The lady had cameras in the place, gave the buyer access to cameras to watch for 3 weeks, said, I believe it. I'll go into empty the machines with you. That's how you did that deal. But that's not the average circumstance. And that's not no need for an earnout. The only time I see earnouts of any real consequence that makes sense for those of you out there curious about them is if you have a very small private practice, like an accounting firm, doctor, dental office, where the doctor or the dentist or the accountant is the relationship with all the clients, and you'll do some form of money down with some form of an earnout over 1 or 2 to 3 years based on client retention to ensure the company can perform at the metrics that are presented. Otherwise, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to do that, in my opinion. And most
Mhm.
owners aren't going to agree to it anyway because they don't need to.
So we kind of talked a little bit about how to prepare if you're a buyer when you're starting
Yes.
off, debunking misconceptions. Another thing that a lot of buyers who aren't like closely connected to the SMB, small medium sized business ecosystem realize, and you touched on this, is the books aren't really that clean all the
No,
time.
they're not audited financials. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Exactly. So, can you highlight what a buyer can expect to receive from a business when they're doing their due diligence and things like that? Like, what are the financials going to look like?
That's a great point. And let's break it up into two different prospecting points. At first contact, then after, let's say, an offer and LOI, because that's two
Yeah.
different things. And I
Yeah.
think too
Yeah.
often buyers want to skip to the due diligence questions and don't realize that's not the right place or time for that. And nor do you need to really see that. You haven't earned the right to see the full tax returns and other financial information. So let's start off, say you've inquired, you filled the NDA financial form, you're in the realm to make a possible decision to buy this business. You make sense as a buyer candidate.
Yeah. That's a good
Typically,
way to tee up the question.
but you said exactly how buyers feel about it. So that's exactly the way we should break it down. Like, let's take this for example. You've inquired, you've come in, you meet some qualifications. Typically, there's a buy sell. The first financial information you're going to see, whether you have a buy sell with the owner or not, is going to be probably a year-to-date P&L, maybe one or two previous years, a hard asset list of the asset value, because every ad has, typically revenue, cash flow, whether it's EBITDA, SDE, FF&E value, year founded, maybe some other information for real estate or other contextual important keynotes. You're going to see some of that. At this time, you're not going to get every single tax return, a full employee breakdown, and customer concentration, list broken out by customer. A good broker will say, hey, if there are any red flags, those will be addressed in other notes as well to tag along with the initial information provided. So you have a better understanding to ask proper questions to the owner and formulate, how do I begin this process? Once you've gone through that, typically owners agree or like, or there seems like there's some common ground that makes sense. Then you'll get access to tax returns and start doing some more in-depth financial work. From there, you can make a basis of if you want to do an actual offer, LOI, or how you want to move forward. From there, then we start the real analysis of bank statements and any real crucial or critical financial information. And often many buyers use this and get this done with a QOV to kind of sum up due diligence. Now, that's a quarterly of earnings report for those of you listening. If you're buying a decent sized business, you need to get one done, or at least consider it. It's worth the cost. Yes, it may prove the numbers aren't perfect, but like you said earlier, George, these are Main Street books. I've seen great companies have good books. I've seen great companies have terrible books. Accounting is not the same everywhere. GAAP accounting rules are real, but how they're entered into the program is what matters. It's the person entering the data, not always the data itself that can be the problem, intentional or not. I've seen bookkeepers just wipe out invoices. I've seen bookkeepers put every expense under one labeled expense. That's something in due diligence. When you see in the P&L and initial discovery, post LOI, say, hey, we really got to break this down so I know exactly what these true expenses are. Or if you've got personal expenses, I need you to itemize these out and produce proof. So if I go to a lender, I can use that as part of my add back, which we could do a whole segment on business valuation, how that applies. But to bring it down to a low level here, that's kind of what's going on.
I think it's like a really key point here because a lot of times when people start looking to buy a business and maybe they came from like corporate America or they were an accountant before
Yep.
at like a big accounting firm, or maybe they
Mm-hmm.
worked for like a hedge fund and they were used to
Yeah.
looking at high quality financial statements. When you come down
Mm-hmm.
into the small and medium sized business space, you're not looking at audited financial
You're not.
statements. The people that are generally doing the accounting, it could be like the owner's wife, hypothetically, and
All
she's
the time.
entering it into QuickBooks, or they just have a bookkeeper that they outsource it to, and really
Mm-hmm.
the accounting is only done at the year end for tax purposes.
And that's it. They have the invoice and statements to back it up. Sometimes I see them just destroy the invoice because they paid it. I'm like, please keep it, keep a copy of that. And that happens far too often. And I think too many buyers too, when we talk about things to prepare for, if your first question in your inquiry is, I need all the P&L's tax returns right away, take a step back, reformulate your process. Because if you don't even know anything how this business structure works or makes sense, you don't need this. I mean, a great example of this real quick is people love trade business, as we know. They love the service, HVAC, plumbing, electrical. We've got a large plumbing company that does mostly new construction in municipalities. Every inquiry, I need P&Ls and how much service revenue. How about we call and say, look, this doesn't really do a lot of service. Oh, well, then never mind. You're so ready to jump the gun to start doing due diligence questions. You didn't even ask, is it a service or new construction-based deal? Because people don't want to actually, I think, slow down the process and really identify their prospects. Just a little note there for all you listening.
The big thing too here, we kind of glossed over this a lot. There's not really a perfect business out there, I would
There's
say.
not.
there's going to be hair on virtually all of these
Everyone.
deals. And that should be exciting to a lot of buyers out there,
Mm-hmm.
because where there's problems with the business or little hairy sections of it, this can be where
Mm-hmm.
you can focus on actually optimizing the business to improve your margins and actually grow it. So I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't necessarily think of these things as being bad. For buyers that are new coming in, how long should they expect it take them to buy a business, to search for a business, find one, and get it across the
Okay.
finish line?
Great question. That's very multi-layered here. So let's start with just define the right business. Give yourself at least a year, especially if you're not the most capitally, sufficient person and you've got a thinner margin. It's going to be a lot harder to find the right deal. As we mentioned, books aren't always perfect. So you may think you found a deal, but you may go through one or two because the books just don't perfectly line up to fit what your financing contingencies can support. Give yourself at least a year. And honestly, I would take the first quarter of that year. Don't even bother inquiring. This is going to sound crazy, but hear me out here. Start looking at all the different resources, where listings are and why they're there and what's going on, how they're moving and which ones are popular and which ones look to fit your market. Really know what you're looking for. But if you see something that's perfect, of course, reach out. But do your homework first. You wouldn't walk on a car lot and buy the first car you saw. You go online and look at all the different opportunities, do some homework, do some research, see what they're selling for. And if you don't know, reach out to the proper, respectable authorities and or professionals and say, hey, I want to start this journey. What should I look for? What should I do? We love those conversations. I would love to talk to you then and guide you so you can then go source what you want versus just click on every single thing you think might be attractive, because you're going to burn yourself out. So give yourself at least a year to find the right business. From there, from start of inquiry to close can be a really almost a year in some cases. I've seen some deals get really dragged out for the bigger ones, but traditionally 1 to 2 months, inquiry to meeting the owner in a buy-sell meeting to reviewing basic information, submitting an offer. From there, it could be 1 to 6 months based on the SBA lender. If there are any factors that come into play, like issues during due diligence, during the Q of E, if there's real estate involved, you have to get clear title, if there's some stuff missing. Hey, I've had UCCs from 10 years ago pop up at a closing table. No one can find a lender who got bought out 17 times to get the UCC, so it took a month to figure that out. Like, there are always going to be random hiccups. It doesn't mean it's a bad deal, but don't search for perfection. If you look for perfection, you're going to spend 10 years finding it if you ever buy a business. You got to take it for a grain of salt. Don't prove imperfection in the business. Find why it makes sense for you to buy it. Yes, there will be issues. Every owner understands that. Every broker knows that. But if your goal is to find why everything's wrong and have that war, you're taking the search in the wrong direction. It should be, what are you trying to accomplish? That's buy a business, make a life-changing decision, and move forward. And if you haven't psychologically done your budget, know your risk tolerance, and prepares yourself, then you're probably not going to be able to find one you like. And that means your timeline is going to expand rapidly.
One of the things that I forgot to touch on earlier when we were talking about like misconceptions and trends in the industry was, it seems like there's this push right now to participate for almost business buying courses where you pay someone money and they'll train you how to buy a business. Are you seeing this work?
No, because what I see a lot applied is there are some good things these people do teach, these services do provide. There are things like, hey, you should have a good LOI draft. Here's a good base template. There are a lot of, here things
Everything
to
we've
ask
talked
for.
about.
Yeah, things to ask for. But I've seen them place these thoughts in people's brains how a deal is, because the person, I did one deal like this and you should do all your deals like this. Your deal structure and deal philosophy needs to be a little bit flexible based on what's available, what you're looking for, and the location that qualifies for you, and who you can work with. Because some of these courses tell people, I'm going to give you $1 million worth of value for $10,000. Who sells their knowledge that cheap? It's not real. And honestly, if you're going to follow one person's playbook, it's not going to apply to everybody. You have to be flexible. My biggest advice is most brokers will give you that for free or give you a pretty good understanding of what's going on. And their job is to help move the transaction along. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do some outside research, have some outside understanding, and produce these questions and ideas with them. But if you're going to rely on somebody who's never going to be a part of your deal to give you this play-by-play playbook, who cannot attend for all the millions of factors that can interchange into a deal, you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And that's when it fails mostly, because they're told, well, I have to have this. This is market. Well, sir, it's not. And quite frankly, Mr. Joe who owns Tire Shop don't give a damn if that's market. This is what he wants. Like, they forget it's still a true negotiation and it's still someone else's business. They don't have to sell to you. And I think a lot of the courses inbred this mindset that you're entitled to all this because you're the buyer and you deserve it. Yes, if you make an offer, you are entitled to do due diligence, but you're not entitled to be a jerk and dictate everything either. And I think sometimes these courses kind of push people into these slots. And I've had buyers who bought those courses who claim they want to do something who are more than qualified. 4 years later, still haven't bought a damn thing from at all. Who keep in touch. It's like, so you paid all this money into a course, you could have got help for free and you didn't do anything with it, except just spend your money. And also too, Not every LOI applies to every state. Every state has different laws and regulations. Keep that in mind. So you need to know what works for where your market states. I've seen some guys, I have to have a 5-year non-compete. Louisiana's max is 2. I'm not a lawyer, but I've done 850 deals. So if that's your deal breaker, you should just walk now. It's small things like that where you need to get proper advice and proper, assistance.
And the other thing that I've seen slightly growing, maybe, or just growing online, I should say, maybe not in actual practice, is buyers trying to engage buy-side brokers. There's polarizing views about this in the broker community of
I agree.
buy-side brokers. How are you advising or buyers whether they should engage a buy-side broker or shouldn't? It sounds like it's probably a case-by-case basis here.
It is, and I think a lot of the problem is it's people who come in from a different background, high financial. In the M&A world, buy-side brokerage is much more common.
Real estate too, right? Real estate
Yeah,
too.
it is. But when you get to the smaller level, it's really not that common. And the biggest problem I find with the buy-side brokerage firms that I've dealt with is that they come to market, they say they have this buyer. They've never really screened this buyer's true background, make sure they've actually got the capacity to buy the deal they want to do. Speed of influence, we'll get back to what they're doing with that nonsense. And they come in and they don't bring value. They don't help you really value the company. They just I've seen the 5 we've dealt with in the last 3 or 4 years, which is about the most we'll ever deal with ever again, I can promise you, is we'd hand them stuff and they just hand it over. They're not adding any actual value to your team except we're going to help you negotiate. You're paying someone this much to help you negotiate? You can negotiate with the broker helping the seller right now or other people in that firm. You're paying someone a whole bunch of extra money to walk around and basically just hand over the same information that you're being given already. And especially to source leads too. These buy-side brokers that source leads saying they have clients. And influencers are doing this now too, wanting us to sign up to their platform, which I refuse to do. You're going to tell me that a buyer in Colorado wants to buy a laundromat in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and run an absentee. Person who's never bought a business, has no management background, and says, I want to use an SBA loan. When on the freaking ad, it says you can't get SBA financing because the financials are too bad. So you didn't even read the ad, and you're sending me a lead saying, why haven't you called this person? Because you didn't even do your homework correctly. And I know that sounds a little frustrating, but these are the emails that I get every single day and in mass quantity because I have 7 offices across a big area. I have, I guess, maybe an exponential feel for it because I get so much volume that I see it more than the average person might in a lone wolf operation or a small 2 or 3 person front in one part of the country. I'm spread out over 2 different states over a large area. I see a lot of that. And I think people sourcing AI and other, services to scrape listings and to scrape products and to send it to you is a bad start. If you're not one, like we said, to do your homework early on, you're going to outsource and pay somebody, you're probably not really invested in buying a company. Or you don't have the resources and time to do it because you're so busy. How are you going to get through a deal when the deal shows up? Are you going to be able to carve out 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week to do your deal, especially in crunch time when the SBA's all over you trying to get due diligence done? I say that with context, not in a mean way, but as in there's a lot you need to be careful for and what to watch out for if you want to do it correctly. And a lot of firms out there just pay us, click and pass it on. That's the real estate mentality. Well, I have a client who looked at anything that has, 4,000 square feet in Baton Rouge. Okay, great. But did you realize that this is only 2,000 and 2,000 that front and then a warehouse in the back? Oh, well, he wouldn't want that. Well, then read the ad. There's a lot of laziness in that regard. And I get a little ticked off by that because it doesn't take a lot to read a proper listing, scan, really do some homework and know. And two, if you're a good buy-side broker and you've done this for a long time, you can look at which ads make sense and which margins make sense and know this makes a good sense for my client or not just throwing stuff against the wall to see if it sticks. That's not a good approach. Having a real thorough process is what matters.
That onus is probably on the buyer to vet that buy-side broker to make sure that they're hiring a quality.
PSA out there, do not pay someone $5,000 to $15,000 to scrape biz by sell for you and hand you leads. You can do it for free yourself.
Okay, I want to recap some of this because I think it's pretty important to help these buyers out particularly in the early days. So a lot of information out there, misconceptions we're seeing with potentially hiring a service to teach you how to buy a business. Be wary of that. Engaging buy-side brokers. Be wary of that. Do your homework on both of these. No money down isn't always that common. I don't want to say it doesn't happen because it does happen, but
it makes up less than 0.01%, put it that way.
Yeah. And the other big misconception out there is absentee ownership. Not saying that any business can't be absentee ownership, but most of these businesses, not all. Yeah. It's going to take a little bit of work. It's going to take work in the beginning to really learn the business and get it to a point of absentee ownership. And then with how buyers can prepare when they're going to start their search to buy a business. It's really understanding like the industries that you're excited about, having
Hmm.
experience, and then understanding your financial capacity and what you feel comfortable with. What's your tolerance for capital,
Correct.
leaving, depositing it in, or buying a business?
And I'd add
Okay.
to know your buyer profile. I know Tupelo has this profile to help people kind of know. Make sure you're presenting yourself in the manner in which you want to be received. No, don't just say anything and everything because you know you don't. Narrow it down, be specific, be concise. When a broker sees you're being concise and directed in your search, you'll be surprised how much more help you can get and also how they can properly provide that to you in those options out there. When it's a little bit of everything, come on, you're not looking at everything. You're dreaming. You're not, you're playing house.
And you're probably not the right buyer for everything out there,
That's right. You're not.
quite frankly.
You're not. Just because it's $1 million in EBITDA doesn't mean you should be looking at it.
So when we started off this podcast, we had this how to buy a business, and it was going to be a one
Mhm.
long episode, and we are virtually in section one of this
Yes,
whole outline here. So I think we're going to break this up into a few different sections
we can do that.
because right now we're about at 40 minutes. So I want to pause here, and then we can pick up later to go into, we have like how to inquire upon a listing, how to
Mhm.
formulate your LOI, and things like that. But
Mhm.
this premise here is just preparing yourself when you're a buyer to understand the market and preparing yourself to put your best foot forward when you actually do acquire.
Absolutely. Because why waste time going out there looking if you don't know what you're getting into? I mean, anything else you do in life, you prepare yourself. And if you're going to start your journey with no idea, you're going to wander a lot further and waste a lot more time.
And this is going to be arguably the largest financial investment you make in your life.
The largest risk you're ever going to take, you should say. Because let's be honest, if you're having to personally guarantee, say it's a $5 million SBA loan, and you put 500 down, you're guaranteeing $4.5 million. Think about that. Just it's a lot out there to do. You're changing your whole life. Why would you start that journey not doing homework? And I'll say one thing, George, to wrap it up. I've had a lot of buyers over the last 6 months, mid 30s, or who've seen our podcast coming out and saying, "Hey, I'd love to meet and talk about strategy for the next 6 months to a year before I do something." There is a lot of good buyers out there who are
That's
listening to
smart.
this. And Lou Holtz once told at a convention my dad was, the sad part is all of you here are the ones who don't need the help. It's those of you not in the conference today who should be here listening and learning to be better at what you need to do. And those of you listening, you're making their step in the right direction by doing this, getting the right formulation, and you will be able to execute at a lot higher level, especially with more sellers coming to market and more buyers, you will be able to execute on what you want.
Exactly. Well, stay tuned, and we're going to have part 2, part 3, and maybe even a part 4 and 5. But
That's
yeah,
right.
appreciate the time, Brennan.